feet, 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 feet. One-ways. If you don't know what one-ways are in Valorant, basically it allows you to see your enemy while your enemy can't see you. And Omen is the king of one-ways, so that's why it's important that you know the best one-way spots to help make your opponent's life a living nightmare. Look at this one-way right here. How is a player supposed to retake from this position? Exactly, they're not. We're going to go over all of the best Omen one-way locations and how to place them for every single map, so stick with us. Let's get into it, starting with our first map, Haven. Most one-ways you're going to be using on defense as it gives you more time to set them up, but you can also use one-ways on offense, generally for post-plant, or sometimes to help your team take territory more safely. I'll try my best though to explain what the uses are for each one-way, so just stick with me. Something else I want to mention before we start is there's actually a lot of one-ways that you can do in the game, and I mean a lot. But many of them just are so inconsistent that it's really hard to feel if it's useful for mentioning in this guide. My goal is to give you consistent one-ways that you can use in all of your games, and when they just end up falling to the ground, it's not really worth the trouble to learn. So if you're looking for the most consistent one-ways, always keep your eye out on the map for boxes like this. Here on A site, there are plenty of them, but basically on every map, there's stuff like this that you can use a one-way and play off of. Obviously, these are most helpful if you're in a situation where enemies will be pushing up long or short towards you. When using these though, try to make sure that you're not peeking out towards long or towards the inside of short. Because there is a downslope here, it makes it so enemies will be able to see you under the one-way easier. Oh, by the way, if you didn't know how a one-way works, basically what these smokes do is they abuse a concept in the game called angle advantage to give you an upper hand in fights. We've talked about angle advantage before on the channel. Basically, whichever player is closest to an angle is going to be able to see the enemy player first. This functions with vertical angles, but it also functions with horizontal angles, and that's where one-ways come in. Whichever player is closer to the smoke is going to have a disadvantage. This is why when using one-ways, you should try to stand as far back from the smoke as you can. Either that, or playing at an elevation is also another strong tactic with one-ways, as it basically removes the angle that the player could possibly see you from. But anyway, going back to these one-ways, I could see these being useful if you're a defender getting pushed on A site, or if you're an attacker playing post-plant and the defenders are retaking from sewers or A-long and they are forced to push into these. And this is when one-ways are going to be most powerful, when enemies have no choice but to push into them, because otherwise they'll likely just be waiting them out or go somewhere else. Keep in mind, you can throw these smokes from anywhere too. It may just take some practice with some to know exactly where you're aiming. Basically, the general idea with all of these is that you need to place the green arrow on top of something. Whether it's a door frame or a nearby structure, it's really not too crazy. Here's a good post-plant smoke for CT if you're looking for it as well. Switching over to B site, this is a good one-way I've seen professional teams use. Basically, they'll throw down this one-way and use it as cover to TP onto B site safely and plant the bomb, and then TP back towards mid and play post-plant. I can't remember what team used this. I think it may have actually been Fnatic, but I could be wrong on that. But it was pretty cool to see this strat get used. It basically just prevents any players from swinging out on the bomb planter, and his teammates can hold it from mid. Remember though, one-ways can also work against you, and this smoke basically prevents his team from swinging out the left side of site, so if you're looking to take back site, this might not be the best way to do it, and normal smokes could be better. Here are some other one-ways you can throw on B though. Use them at your own will. If you're holding site, these first two would make it really difficult for them to push out, but if you're retaking B site, you can always one-way the back of site, and this basically makes the shield player useless for a couple of seconds. Now, if I were playing backside and somebody did this to me, I'd probably just try to hide in the smoke until it disappeared, so probably be careful of that, but this is something that you can do. Transitioning into middle, if you want to one-way window, you can do this. Basically, just place the green arrow on top of the window frame. This one isn't perfect, but it's definitely annoying, and it makes it more difficult for the players to hide in window. As you can see, there are cracks that they can see through this, but if someone still did this to me, I would not want to peek this. And if I wanted to play really aggressively for mid control, you can actually one-way the top of grass as well. I don't know why, but the thought of somebody using this one-way on me feels really funny, so yeah, now you know. Here's a more applicable one on top of the garage doors though. I like to use this one from on top of the box and garage, but you also might get pre-fired here, so be careful of that. Moving over towards C site, here are two smokes that you can use for long. Probably wouldn't recommend either of them, except maybe if you're in a clutch situation and you know that they're coming from long. Using these to lock down a full push probably isn't the best idea, since it's fairly obvious where you're playing and you could get really punished for it. However, there is another smoke, and this one's actually one of the one-ways I use most in the game. It's just really easy to throw, and it basically cuts off players from pushing in through garage. I'll use this during post plants or if I believe a C-split is coming. It basically just makes it so nobody can push through garage. Switching over to retakes, this is a decent one-way that you can throw to help your retake. It basically prevents players from swinging out from logs. It also prevents you from swinging out from logs, but as long as you guys know this, it can make you getting out to site just a little bit easier. It also blocks off this off angle on top of the green box, so that can be nice as well. And that's pretty much it for Haven. Now, that was a lot of stuff for the first map, and that's because at SkillCapped, we just like to be thorough. One of my favorite comments I like to read from our videos is how players have been climbing the ranks, whether it's from Iron to Gold or Gold to Immortal, and they feel like we've genuinely helped them improve. I personally think it's really cool that we are able to help so many players improve at the game, and if you wanted just a taste of that, I highly encourage checking out the rest of the stuff that we have to offer on SkillCapped.com. Our hyper improvement system is also backed by our rank improvement guarantee, meaning if you don't get value out of it, you'll literally get your money back, no questions asked. If you're looking for the fastest way to improve at Valorant, full stop, check out SkillCapped.com, link in the description below. Boom, you're on bind. Look at this one way. No, that one's boring. Look at this one way. There's a lot of great spots to one way on bind, and the one on short that we just showed is actually a really strong one, but it's also one of the most commonly known one ways. So let's try to focus on some other ones. This one on screen is thrown sort of on the curve of this wall. It basically just sticks there, and then you can play an off angle so you don't get pre-fired and take advantage of any enemies who may push through this. This can be really annoying and is a decent counter to the Raze Roomba that we all hate. Similarly, you can do the same thing on the curves on the arches of B long. This can make a really good one way to watch from sight, especially if your teammates are holding hookah. You can basically do this on all of the arches, so feel free to pick and choose whichever side is best for you. It takes some practice, but eventually you'll master how to do this, and then your smokes can look like mine, and oh no, I made a butt. Here's a decent one way you can use for post plants if you know somebody has to come from elbow. Keep in mind that it doesn't help your teammates on site, so maybe consider a normal smoke if you have people who are going to die from this guy. And here's a great post-plant smoke for CT. Theoretically, you could throw this one way while taking the site, but if I was your teammate and I got shot from underneath this by chance, I would probably be pretty upset, so maybe just reserve this one for holding site rather than taking the site. Switching over towards A site, besides the two smokes that we talked about at the beginning, there are a couple of decent smokes that you can use here. This one you can use for showers. It's a little trickier than the others, but I was able to figure out how to get it pretty consistently. Basically, with these specific smokes, what you'll want to do is rather than using the left click and right click to select the distance, instead use your W and S keys to get a more precise position. Your goal is to make it so the green arrow climbs up the arch, and then at the very back of the arch, it will fall down to the door frame. This is where you want to place the smoke. It's a little bit trickier at first, so practice it in the range before using it, but this is a strong smoke if they hit the showers TP or need to come through showers. Here's a one way I thought would be pretty funny. It actually kind of sucks for the defenders, but it almost looks like a defender one way. On offense, you can take an angle next to the TP and be able to see enemies where they can't see you. Another offense smoke for showers is this one. I highly do not recommend swinging this smoke as they will have the advantage then, but you can use it to slow take showers if you so choose. Lastly, here's a U-Haul smoke that you can do for post plant. This one's pretty strong. It makes U-Haul very annoying to take. Alright though campers, it's time for us to take on Ascent. What are the best one ways for Ascent? Well, this one's probably the most commonly used one. Oh, by the way, you'll probably notice I'm toggling between smoking modes when showing this. If you didn't know already, if you press R, it will toggle between human form and shadow form. Human form was the only form in the beta days, so us beta players, we're pretty familiar with it. Yeah, human form is pretty nice for finding some more precise lineups, so use it as you find appropriate. Anyway, listen guys, I don't know what to tell you. This map's walls were designed really weirdly, so you can basically just throw down one ways wherever you want. Just pick a wall and chuck it inside of it. It will normally stick. You can tell if it sticks by the arrow on your screen. If it's inside the wall, it will probably stick. Some of these obviously more useful than others, but you get the point. I'll show you a few smokes I use on the map though that work pretty well, one of them being the A main smokes, but the other one being a B main smoke. You can also do a similar smoke on the entrance of B main, but both of these are pretty good at locking down this area. I've also seen Omens do this one way in market when taking site. Don't do this. The market player can just see under the smoke and kill your teammates while they're pushing onto site. Hey, also when placing these standard smokes in market, make sure it's flushed with the doorway so players can't just use it as cover. I see other bad smokes all the time too, and take advantage of these as well. Hey, if they're pushing into mid-market, throw this smoke on the wall. It's pretty good. Here are the usual smokes people use on B site for post plant. They're pretty decent, but here are the one ways that you could be throwing on B site. These make it a lot more difficult for players to push through, and if you're hunkering down on B site for a potentially behind in numbers site hold, this could be your saving grace. Maybe use these next time. Moving over towards A more, you can use these one ways in tree. It works pretty well. You could also do one a little bit deeper. This one is a little more dangerous to peek into though if they're tiles. If you play on this box, it's a little bit better, but for the most part, I don't recommend using this one a whole lot. You can also use the smoke on tiles. This one doesn't look great until you actually see it from tiles. Basically, this is just really annoying to peek into catwalk with. It's not perfect by any means, but it might catch an enemy by surprise if you want to take a duel here. Lastly, this is a smoke that you can use for tree on post plant. Once again, don't use the smoke when taking site because enemies can see under it, but if you use it for post plant, it will make pushing onto site really annoying for the defenders. Anyway, moving on to split. If you haven't noticed, by the way, all of these maps are timestamped down below, so if you're looking for a specific set of one ways, feel free to refer back to the video and click down below. You're welcome. Similarly to Ascent, these walls were very kind to us, and we can pretty much just place smokes wherever. Here are a few good smokes in B main that you can use. The first one is going to be pretty aggressive. The second one you can play a little bit more passively on. This one you can hold slightly different angles from. You can even one-way pillar too, which is actually very useful for holding sight, especially versus that Sage Wall strat where they basically just wall off heaven and run onto sight. You can also smoke B heaven. This one is just as obnoxious to swing into, and basically enemies are just going to have to wait this one out or use lots of utility to get through it. Speaking of obnoxious smokes, check out this one on the back of B site. There's not a lot of downsides to these smokes, and there's a lot of benefits, so I highly recommend using them. Lots of people are going to say Omen is weak currently in the meta, but stuff like this could actually bring him back to being pretty strong on maps like this, and I highly recommend experimenting with stuff like this. We've all seen the standard mid one-way smokes that Viper mains do, but you can also do this on Omen. Either of these mid smokes are pretty good for holding mid and slowing down any aggressive pushes. By the way, these one-ways are really good ways to shut down hyper-aggressive plays. Lots of times players struggle to shut down these fast pushes, but if players are just trying to book it through these one-way smokes, you're going to slaughter them. Keep this video in mind in case you're ever dealing with those hyper-aggressive plays as Omen. Maybe you can use something like this market push to shut down fast play mid, or any of the B smokes to shut down fast play there. And obviously, you can always use this one-way in sewers if it ever feels appropriate. Maybe you have an op watching market or something and you want to play aggressively here. Moving over to some defensive smokes for A site, this is one of my favorite one-ways in the game here on ramps. It's super easy to place and it makes pushing ramps virtually impossible for the attackers. Remember, when defending against a fast push, sometimes you don't even need to hold the site. Sometimes it's just okay to hold key positions like heaven and play for retake. This smoke is going to make it so basically any attackers can only go onto site and should open up the opportunity for your team to have a strong retake together. Moving over towards A main, this is a common one way that you'll see. It's pretty easy to place, but there are different elevations for it that can be better or worse for you, so be aware of that. Notice how some of these smokes leave more room at the bottom than others, and if you leave too much room at the bottom, it can be problematic. I prefer to place the smoke where the sphere is slightly above the ground, and this seems to work the best, but it's your call. If you want to place an even deeper one-way too, you can do that. This one might not land in time if they're really fast, but it's still a really good one-way if you can get it down. Notice, by the way, how I'm using the Phantom in all of these clips. That's just because the Phantom doesn't have bullet tracers, and if you're shooting through a smoke, that's generally going to be the move. Although you're using a one-way, if you try to shoot through it with a Vandal, the enemy might trace where your shots are coming from and shoot back, which could be problematic. Just a tip though. Here's a one-way closer to sight if you need it. Like I said, basically you could throw a smoke on all of the walls, so figure out wherever works best for you. Now, if you're looking for a post-plant one-way, throw this baby on screens and they will have a nightmare of a time exiting. You can also back up and use a one-way on elbow. I could see this being useful if you're in a clutch situation and you want to limit where the enemies can come from. Basically, if you throw this one-way, if they peek you from elbow, you'll be able to see them and they won't see you, so you can focus all of your attention towards the other side of pillar. Moving over towards defender spawn, if you guys take heaven, this could be a good one-way to cut off rotates. Again, if it feels vague on how to throw these things, most of the time they're literally as easy as just aiming at the wall, waiting for the red arrow to appear, and then clicking. They should just stick in the wall. And then lastly, here's a post-plant smoke for B. This is probably the best if your team is playing back sight, rather than if they're playing towards hell. Moving towards Icebox, starting out with probably the most common Omen one-way. This one on B-long can be annoying to deal with, however, most of the time enemies will probably just drone this out, so you won't get a ton of value out of it normally. Nevertheless, it's still nice to know in case teams don't know how to counter it. Since Omen can teleport too, you can also play this from on top of the box if you'd like to get a better angle. My favorite and most used smoke on Icebox is actually a one-way though, and it's used on retakes. This smoke on B-long when coming in for a retake is absolutely stellar for blocking off so many angles, making the B retake infinitely easier. This makes it so if players are playing long, they have to peek out through a one-way, and if they're on top of the box, they have to drop down. Using this, you can isolate yellow with a blind, and it's GG's from there. If you're feeling like Flexinja, you can even throw in a TP for style points, and because of this smoke, it's actually fairly safe. I think I've only been punished once for this, so yeah, go crazy. Staying on B site, here's a decent post-plant one-way that you can throw. It also blocks off the top of site, which can be really nice. It's most usable from long on top of the box, but you can also get a little bit of value out of it from other places. You can also place your smoke on top of the green box on site and block off the top of site while placing a one-way on the swing from site, so this one is also usable. Although, let's be honest, most of the time on B, you're just going to want to smoke Snowman. Moving over towards mid, here's a smoke that you can do while pushing up through tube. This gives you a pretty good angle. The only problem is enemies can make it on top of the crate, so be wary of that. You can also use a one-way right here. This one is nice because if you just smoke mid, it actually denies your team information. But by using the smoke, you can make it more difficult for them to take mid while also not denying your team info. This smoke in tube serves a double purpose of one-waying underneath while also smoking tube. It's not really optimal that Omen holds this position, but this is actually pretty effective if you do find yourself here. Moving over towards A site, you can use this one way to help hold the ground floor while also blocking off parts of pipes. I wouldn't recommend staying here though because you could get overwhelmed. This is why it's nice to have your TP and Omen's kit to fall back from positions like this. This next smoke isn't much for the one way, but it blocks off belt and allows you to peek more safely towards site if you're looking to do that. This is a pretty decent smoke. Here's a one-way for maze. Honestly, this one could really slow down an A site push as it also blocks off pipes, removing a lot of the angles that attackers generally will use. And lastly, on attacker side for A, the only real great one-way is this one in Nest. It basically makes it really difficult for any player's back site or rafters to hold, and it can make defending A site a literal nightmare. If you're playing post plant though, here's a really annoying smoke that you can throw while playing on top of 410. Moving on to our final map though, Breeze. The newest addition to Valorant, you don't see Omen very much on Breeze. This is mostly just because Viper is really strong on this map, but maybe some of these one-ways can entice you, so here you go. The first one is for A main. You can play this one from a number of different spots on the right, so it can actually be pretty versatile. Notice how even if you're in the water, enemies in cave won't be able to see you, so that's pretty good. You can also use this one way a little bit further back, but this is probably going to be Viper walled most of the time, so this one's not going to be nearly as applicable as the first one. If you're trying to hold backside though, you can also chuck a smoke into the pyramid, and it will give you a slight advantage on enemies swinging out on you or trying to push through the trench. This can be nice to hold a close position behind pyramids and make your teams retake that much easier if you can actually hold this. I was going to mention this doors one way, but it seems hardly usable considering how high the door frame is, but I figured I'd just mention it anyway, maybe somebody gets value out of it. Here's an interesting smoke for attack. If you smoke on top of the boxes on the back of A site, it creates an annoying one-way for players playing on boxes, but it also blocks off the bridge peak from heaven, allowing your players to swing out just a little bit more to capitalize on this. Alternatively, you can also smoke bridge and it will one-way the defenders spawn. This one is probably the most common attacker smoke for A. Moving over towards mid for defenders, this one-way works great on elbow. There's also a nice angle that you can hold this from nest. Honestly, you could throw a one-way on any of these boxes in mid and it's pretty decent. Just make sure that when you're doing it, you actually land it on the center of the box and not on the edge like an idiot. For attackers, if you want to force a homie to wide swing out of nest, you can do that with a simple one-way in the doorway. This basically just makes it so if anyone does want to peek out of here, they have to wide swing really far, at which point you'll see them first. Moving over towards B site, if you're looking to hold tunnel, this is an okay one way that you can use. There aren't a lot of great positions to hold here though, but this might help. And then shifting our attention towards B main, this is a strong one way that you can play in many positions from. On top of this, pillar is normally good for one kill, so if you're playing Omen, I'd probably make B site your home most of the time. You can also do this more aggressive one way, as it'll make it more annoying for them to push out of elbow. For attack on B, there aren't many great places to one way, but this is one on the wall that will do a decent job of making the wall player panic just a little bit more. Let's be honest though, most of the time standard smokes are probably going to do the best job right here. Other than that though, yeah, thanks for watching guys. If you learned a new smoke or two, remember all of this and more is available at SkillCapped.com, so be sure to check that out, link in the description below. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel down below. It really does help us out. I know Omen isn't as meta as he used to be, but I actually feel like they buffed his one-way secretly. I don't know if they made his smoke easier to stick on walls or what, but you can place a one-way in so many spots now, it's actually crazy. Anyway though, as always guys, I'm King, and we here at SkillCapped want to thank you all for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.